Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. This is a UK political update, and I'm going to try and give particularly my international viewers, but British ones as well, hopefully a fairly objective sense of what's going on in the UK with regard to immigration, flags, roundabouts, Elon Musk, foreign influence, Reform UK, and this movement in the UK to paint roundabouts and have flags up and whatnot. And I don't want this to be a video whereby I'm doing any great analysis of immigration as to whether it's positive, whether it's negative, having to make any arguments about it, other than the perception of immigration at the moment is really driving a lot of discontent in the UK, whether you believe immigration is positive or not. And I'm a pretty liberal guy. I sit on the left, and my views on immigration are personally that it's complicated. It's nuanced. You can easily generate, especially in the context of our demographic shift from having a lot of old people, having very few old people at the top of the pyramid, a big set of people in the middle, and a lot of children to replace these people. But, with science and our increased longevity, there are more people at the top, fewer people being born, not enough people paying tax in the middle. What do we do about that? Well, we need to have more children. This is a problem that Ukraine suffers at the moment, and China and all countries are going to be suffering with this. So how do you pay for a burgeoning section of society that are old and retired with more physical ailments? You get older, you can't work, but you get weaker and you have more ailments, but you're actually surviving longer. And then you have more people getting cancer and dementia, and you have to kind of pay for that. And we're really struggling because we're not having enough children. We don't like immigration, but the way of dealing with not having enough children is to have immigration. But if people don't want to have immigration, you are going to have a very tight purse, whereby there's not enough tax going into public coffers to pay for all of these people up here. So this is a real problem, but no one seems to want to solve it with immigration. Oh dear. Okay, so with that in mind, though, there is this perception at the moment that, well, irrespective of whether we need immigration or not, we don't want it, say a lot of people. And particularly in the case of the UK, it's like, well, if you're from France and you're here, yeah, I don't have a problem. If you've got brown skin or black skin, yeah, okay, might have some more problems. If you're wearing something that indicates you are of a different kind of religion than one that I would find acceptable, then that's even more problematic. So we have all these other issues thrown into this as well. Now, recently, well, I say recently, but this has really boiled over from last year, where you had the Southport riots as a migrant, or actually a 17-year-old from a migrant family went and stabbed some girls at a dance club, and it caused these riots to erupt. And there were all these rumors that it was some Muslim migrant that had come in and yada yada yada, and this wasn't the case. The rumors were not true, but they were stoked by people who used them to great effect to create real discontent, and they drove a lot of anti-migrant rhetoric and sentiments to the point that there were riots in Southport. And those riots led to arrests and a lot of division. But the riots were supposedly to protect our girls, to protect our women, and that migrants were threatening women and children's safety. And that has kind of bubbled over to this year, where now it appears that migrants' facilities such as hotels, normal hotels that are housing migrants as they await their asylum claims to be processed, they're housed there. And this has been a policy of the Conservative government previously. Last 14 years, this is what has happened. But it's interesting now we're starting to see Conservative politicians go, this is horrible. We should be closing these these hotels down. You're like, hang on, literally this happened on your watch, and you didn't do anything about it. And now Labour are in, and you're shouting about how these need to be closed. Okay, interesting. But there was one in Epping Forest, place near London, where someone was accused of sexual abuse of some locals, and then locals got up in arms and started demanding that this hotel got closed down, and it caused all sorts of ruckus. Then there was a court case surrounding it. Anyway, on top of all of that's going on, and now you've got loads of councils saying whether they should close down hotels. The problem is, where do you then house these migrants who are waiting for processing? The problem here, at least, very prima facie, appears to be you need to process much more quickly, and we'll talk about some of the stats in a second. But alongside this, you have had this move of hashtag, raise the colours, raise the flags, all. At night, you've had people go, except it's now happening in the daytime, people going out and painting roundabouts with the St. George's Cross, which signifies England and English culture. And you've had St. George's flags and Union flags be pinned to lampposts and everywhere. You've had then English flags be painted pretty much everywhere. And this has been seen, or some people are claiming that this is, reclaiming nationalism. That there's nothing wrong with this. This is all national pride. We should be happy with this. Why can't we be proud of our nation? But the problem is the sorts of people who have been doing this appear largely, or at least significantly, to be pretty overtly racist. And there's lots of evidence for that. And so therefore it is becoming very divisive, whereby, if you see this as problematic, you're seen as some kind of woke liberal, and if you think this is absolutely magnificent, fantastic, then you're seen as an anti-immigrant racist. And this kind of polarization is taking place. But there's absolutely no doubt that there are certainly a large number of people involved in what are now becoming these walks and protests that are indeed sitting quite far on the right. A number of people that have been identified at some of these gatherings have been seen to be EDL and actual neo-Nazi fascists. There was a meetup in, I think, Falkirk, where, the picture of the guy was like, well, he's literally a neo-Nazi group leader. And so there is going to be a case where the far right are going to be absolutely at the heart of many of these sort of protests and whatnot. So the question is, well, how much of this is kind of like justified, or how much of this represents the general sentiment of many people in the UK, and how much of it is the far right that wants to foment discord and et cetera, and we have these social cohesion problems. Okay, so that's what this video is. I've already explained much of it, but that's what it's going to be about. I'm going to annoy some people who are going to be very in favour of sticking up flags around lampposts and painting roundabouts with the St. George's flag, and hey, what's the problem there? We need to be proud of our nation. But I think there's a healthy nationalism and there's an unhealthy nationalism, and unfortunately this is at least being hijacked by people who are much more likely to be in favour of unhealthy nationalism. And the question is, where do you want this to go? What does this look like eventually? What do you want the country to look like? We should always be asking that question when you have any kind of policy. What's your end goal? Before we discuss the policy, what do you want the country to look like? Okay, and how does this policy go towards making the country look like this? And, is this a sort of policy that makes the country look like this or like that? So, what do we want out of all this? Do we want to just start throwing people with brown skin out of the UK? Do we want to import a kind of ICE policy that the US has at the moment of just going around taking people off the streets and bundling them away to a foreign gulag, sending them off to Rwanda or whatever? If that's definitely what you want, then okay, interesting. My position is always going to be, whatever you do, do it humanely and within the rules of law. and that may be national law, but international law, and you need to do this with compassion. But it doesn't mean you can't have robust immigration regulation and enforcement, but just, due process. Whereas what's going on in the United States at the moment is not following due process, and I think there's a lack of compassion and humanity going on there. So, we can be robust with immigration regulation, but it has to be within those confines, right? So, okay, let's start off with this as a kind of segue into the deeper content. I don't understand the Tories' position, so the Conservative position on migrant hotels. It's basically this policy, which we carried out for years ourselves with no sign of stopping it, is now suddenly the worst thing in the world. Like, guys, that isn't plausible. Okay, so I've already kind of explained that. So we've got the situation with hotels being used to house migrants. But it seems to be open season on those people. There are many questions that we need to think about, which is what percentage of migrants are illegal, and is an asylum seeker an illegal migrant? And if you are worried about brown skinned people or people from different cultures walking around your streets, and you don't see them as part of your culture or your country, then what does this say about, what can you do about that? Like, you can't get back in England or Britain that looked like it did in 1850, right? That is physically impossible. So if you want to get back to that country, you are going to have to literally take illegal, legal, and British citizens who you think are a different culture to yours. You're going to have to evict them from your country. That is going to cause riots. That is going to cause bloodshed. Is that really actually what you want? So, let's get a clear sense of what we want, where we want this all to go. But also understanding that an asylum seeker is not an illegal immigrant, right? It is someone who has come into the country, but then you have the problem is, have you come to the country legally or illegally? But then you enter a process which is a legal process to be assigned some kind of status, so you could be assigned asylum, and then you become a legal migrant who has successfully reached refugee asylum status. And so quite often what you get is this position against people coming in on boats because they're not going through the proper processes. But the thing is, if you go through the proper processes, you never actually get the chance of going through the eventual processes. You get stuck in Calais and so on and so forth, and there isn't the processing capability to allow you to go through the proper checks and balances to get to access the UK refugee asylum system. So you end up coming through on boats, and then people saying, well, now you're illegal, blah, blah, blah. But what percentage of migrants are these? So it's very difficult, because actually illegal migrants really don't turn up in the system very easily. And so trying to work out how many people there are who are illegal migrants is very, very difficult. Some analyses say that 4% of migrants overall are illegal. If that is true, and many people contest that, then you might have a situation where some of these people who are getting upset are actually getting upset at the wrong people. So if you're getting upset at the 4% because you think the 4% represents the 95% or 96%, then your perception is skewing reality. And actually, the big issue for you might be legal migration. So people who are coming over here, getting student visas, getting work visas, coming over here because they've got family already over here, settling down, blah, blah, blah. And coming over here because we don't have people that are white British people willing to pick the fruit in the fields, or we don't have enough white British people that are going through, and I say white British people knowing that British people aren't just white, obviously, but I'm kind of making a salient point hopefully here, is we don't have enough indigenous British people to go through nursing training to become a nurse, or to become a doctor, so on and so forth. Why is that? Well, maybe we've got institutional issues with going around the world sweeping up nurses because it's cheaper to get them once they've qualified from other countries like the Philippines. It's like, well, we could train our own nurses up, but it costs us this much. or we can let another country train our nurses up where it costs them this much, and then we can just import them into the UK because that's cheaper for the taxpayer. And you've got to understand that whatever you want to do with immigration, it will be inflationary, it will be more expensive. So fair enough, if you want to train up British people to be nurses, and lots more British people, then that will come out of the taxpayers' purse usually, and it's much cheaper to do it this other way. Or like literally we aren't, same with doctors. Doctors are very expensive to train, and it's easier for us to go and import those doctors from elsewhere, so on and so forth. So it's the understanding that are you looking at the right form of migration to get angry with, and then understanding that, well, what's involved in us importing these people, and why do we want to import these people? Why is it that we are not prepared to do this work, or why is it that the government isn't prepared to back us up in getting trained to do that work, so on and so forth. So when I talk about immigration being complicated, it's because it is freaking complicated. Okay, the main source of the issue at the moment is this Epping Forest hotel that houses migrants as they wait for their asylum application to be processed. Now, the UK wins a court ruling to keep asylum seekers in this hotel. So what happens is there was this one hotel, but it's happening in many other hotels now, that people were protesting outside because there was someone in it who had an allegation of sexual abuse, and that caused these kind of protests, and then I think the local council then closed down the hotel for asylum seekers, and then the government, it went to court, and actually it kind of reversed that, and now you've got big issues. So immigration has become the dominant political issue in Britain, says Reuters here. The government argued an injunction would lead to further protests. Critics of the hotels for asylum seekers say communities are at risk. So the British government on Friday won a court ruling that means asylum seekers will not have to be evicted from a hotel where a resident was charged with sexual assault, a decision that could ignite more protests and criticism from opponents. Immigration has now become the dominant political issue in Britain, eclipsing concerns over faltering economy as the country faces a record number of asylum claims and arrivals by migrants in small boats across the Channel, including more than 28,000 this year. Although it's not exactly clear that the figures, where we are with figures, because actually, if you look at, so this is an AI review. Under the Labour government, provisional net migration figures show a significant decrease to 431,000 in 2024, 52% reduction from its peak in June 2023. Under the Tories, the decline was primarily due to reduced long-term immigration, particularly from non-EU nationals coming for work and study, though numbers remain higher than the 2010s. Meanwhile, EU net migration has been negative since 2021, and while international student emigration is rising, they have contributed more to net migration post-Brexit than before. So actually, it's complicated, but it looks like figures are coming down. But you're interested to see 2025 though. So, just be careful about what figures are thrown around. Last week, London's High Court granted an injunction to stop asylum seekers being housed in the Bell Hotel in Epping, Essex, about 20 miles northeast of the capital, which had become a focal point for sometimes violent demonstrations after an Ethiopian asylum seeker living there was charged with sexual offences. But on Friday, the Court of Appeal upheld the government's appeal against the ruling, which had been made on planning grounds, and lifted the temporary injunction, which would have led to the asylum seekers being evicted. While the court victory will ease the headache of immediate widespread hotel closures, it opens up the Prime Minister Keir Starmer and his ministers to accusations from his main political opponents that he is siding with asylum seekers over the fears of local people. So here you have this issue that has bubbled up where the locals are saying we don't want them here, and then you have to have them somewhere, right? While you process those applications, and this has been a long existing system. And the decisions initially were made on planning ones, and that's why the I think the appeal was upheld. But the government are in a no-win situation here, because the only thing they can really hope for is just really speeding up the processing of asylum applicants and making sure there aren't too many people sitting in hotels, and that's what they appear to be doing. If you look at, so for example, if we go to the Migration Observatory, they have a July piece on Labour's pledges on migration 1 year in. What does the data look like? So bringing down net migration, reducing reliance on overseas workers, as I was talking about, reducing small boat arrivals by cracking down on smuggling networks, clearing the asylum backlog, so that's a big issue, and then increasing returns, so then actually returning more people to certain countries. And it looks like they have been making some progress here. But it is a complicated picture, and there is it's very nuanced. So I don't really want to go into that at the moment, but I just want to give you enough context to get you to understand what's going on with kind of flags and protests and whatnot. Okay. But as Mike Goldsworthy here says, it's an important point. They're not illegal immigrants. Seeking asylum is legal and has been since 1951. We should really be accepting France's offer of having UK asylum screening facilities in Calais to know who is legit and welcome and who is not. So anyway, you will have a lot of people being fast and loose with the words and the terms here, and that's really important to understand. So, first thing we're going to talk about are concerned mums and dads. Why? Because what's supposed to be the reason, that the official reason given to these protests around Epping Forest Hotel is, we don't want to be seen as anti-immigrants, so we are concerned about the safety of our girls and women in the area. We are concerned mums and dads. That's kind of one of the official lines. But then you see the sorts of things that happens here.
Bit of argy-bargy, cat and mouse. Uh-oh. Here we go. Push him from the officer. Very emotional. Oh, pepper spray. Officer's very emotional.
So the question here, are these people concerned mums and dads? Or is this basically coming down to a lot of young men in balaclavas or not, but essentially young men of a certain political persuasion, maybe certain demographic, getting uptight about immigration? And it's probably the latter. And when pushed, they'll say, "Look, we're concerned for the safety of our females and whatnot." So masked men are among those attempting to enter the London Migrant Hotel, as 5 are arrested. So 5 are arrested, breaking into the hotel, and they appear to be masked men, not really mums and dads concerned about the safety of the local females. Although there's going to be this kind of trope going around. Now, over 6,000 people have written to Reform MP Sarah Potchin. So she's a Reform MP that's just been elected on a hair's breadth recently in a by-election. She's demanded, people are asking, so she essentially claimed that migrants are a threat to women. So when I talk about this trope, it's like this idea that these men coming in, a bit like Donald Trump saying these Mexicans coming in, they're the worst, they're the rapists and the criminals and blah blah blah. This is kind of the idea going on here. People have complained about her saying that migrants are a threat to women, so demanding she retract that. I just want to make a couple of small points on this, that are all fairly big points, is that quite often what you see with these people who claim to be defending the rights of the girls and women in the area is that actually they very much aren't. So here we have a jailed Rotherham rioter filmed himself abusing a 12-year-old girl at Wakefield Flat and gave her an STD. So remember, at these far-right riots outside asylum hotels, supposedly to protect our women and children, the most likely sexual offenders are the ones outside and not inside. So there is an element of this. Some people are reminding ourselves of the Southport riots I talked about last year that had the same kind of rhetoric going on. It turned out that 2 out of 5, so 40% of the men who were arrested at those riots were actually found to have convictions for domestic abuse. So 40% of those men abused their wives and kids, then went out to these riots and said, we are protecting our own women and children. And you're like, whoa, hang on here. and this was reported at the time. 2 out of every 5 people arrested after participating in last summer's riots had been previously reported to the police for domestic abuse. Police data released under Freedom of Information laws shows that 41% of the 899 people arrested for taking part in a violent disorder last July and August had been reported for crimes associated with intimate partner violence. For those arrested by one police force, the figure was as high as 68%. So, like, the idea that they are protecting the local woman there is particularly pernicious, given that many of the people arrested were actually a threat to those around. And this was a point well made today. So John O'Connell says a rapist was arrested and charged in London yesterday, but I imagine the media will barely cover the story very much because the man arrested was white Tory, very rich and a peer of the realm, none of which fits into the current media narrative. So I wonder if you've got people protesting outside of this chap's estate, because actually, and if you don't know this, who this guy is, that's kind of my point. It should be on page 1 of every newspaper. Actually, it has started to be picked up because he is a lord, right? And he's Lord, is it Blockett? Charlie Blockett, and he has a Blockett Hall. Hall is it? Which is let me find this. Sorry, not Brockett Hall. So Brockett Hall is quite incredible. It is a huge estate. He was on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. He's actually quite famous, this guy. Anyway, he's been in court for drugging and raping a woman. And this is, he owns a huge estate. He's incredibly rich and powerful. And you're thinking, I don't see anyone protesting outside this chap's place. So my point here is this really isn't about protecting women. Otherwise, you see a lot more concern for other incidences of this. This is about immigration, really. It's just about immigration. And I'm not saying that is not an issue, by the way. Of course, please remember that. But I'm trying to unpick really what's going on here. When you see these young men going around effectively rioting, I don't think they're massively, truly concerned about the safety of the local women. Asylum hotel protests have intensified over the summer, and Sky News is speaking to the people who have joined them. Over the coming weeks, we'll speak with counter-protesters too, they add. But today we meet Dinah Bentley, a grandmother of 2 who's just joined those calling on asylum hotels to close. And some people on the left calling this out, saying giving disproportionate airtime to unhinged racist pensioners like Dinah Bentley. They say, of course, pinch of salt, is what caused many of the problems in the UK at the moment via Brexit. When will the media ever learn? So we're going to talk about this a little bit later, which is the platforming of these grievances and therefore the amplification of the grievance narrative here, which may skew the reality on the ground of really what is going on. But of course, the perception is reality. And if people are feeling that immigration is an issue, then immigration is an issue. But some people are trying to point out that, do you know what? Be wary of really what's going on here. So when you've been told to blame the poorest for your own shit life so that you don't look at the richest, that's the problem. And someone else pointing out here, asylum seeker benefits cost the UK £60 million a year, which is equivalent to £2 per year per taxpayer. So each taxpayer saying, well, here's £2 of my yearly income, that should sort out all of the asylum issues in the country. And then benefit fraud or benefit error costs £3 billion a year, which supposedly costs £100 per taxpayer. So should we be getting more annoyed with benefit fraud, people who are legally, fraudulently claiming benefit, etc., or simple errors from the government? And then tax avoidance costs, actually it's an opportunity cost. I'd have a slight issue with the way this is phrased. So it is like it hasn't been brought in, but it costs, scare quote, costs the UK £90 billion a year, which would be £3,000 per year per taxpayer. So getting angry with boat people rather than getting angry with Amazon and Google not paying enough tax, just again, it's just perspective. So there's a lot of anger, but I would argue that some of that anger is miscalculated and is thrown at the wrong people, or at least, if you need to be getting £2 worth of angry. If you're really worried about money, let's leave aside social cohesion and looking at people in the street and thinking you're not my culture and I'm angry with that. That's more abstract. But in terms of actual cost, like, is your anger worth £2 a year, or is your anger, you've got a £3,000 a year anger that you are aiming at a £2 a year problem? You should be taking your anger at the small boats crisis, and you should be multiplying that by 1,500, and then applying that to rich people not paying their taxes, or rich corporations not paying their taxes. So just remember perspective. So the biggest con the political class ever pulled was turning immigration into the issue. Working class communities, and this is a point that most of the people you will see in the rest of this video are working class people, most of them. Working class communities set against each other while the elites sit back and laugh. And, we can go back to Brocket Hall and say, hey, I can get away with not being singled out. I'm a rich white guy that has carried out this heinous crime, but let's let the people down there get angry with migrants that have been accused of the same. Working class communities set against each other while the elites sit back and laugh. The real fight is against poverty, inequality, and exploitation, not your neighbor. # know your real enemy. Absolutely on board with this. Now, again, it's not that immigration isn't an issue, but it's about, that being promulgated by others to be the main issue because it serves a much greater agenda. Meanwhile, other issues are untackled. Just be aware of that. And people getting angry with how this is being portrayed on the news. So the BBC breakfast person, swear word there, doesn't seem to understand that if they clear the asylum backlog, there'll be no need for hotels. The Tory reform shill, more interested in getting a gotcha moment. Why didn't she give Tories aggressive scrutiny when they bragged about opening 400 plus hotels? So the idea that some Tory politician was on BBC Breakfast but wasn't really pushed about, hang on, you had 14 years, you opened 400 hotels plus to house these people. Why wasn't the backlog solved within 14 years of your government? And now Labour you're going to shout about how this is a Labour problem. It is a problem for Labour, but it's one they have largely inherited. And again, some more perspective here. So the other narrative you hear quite often, I've heard this from my own family members and whatnot, so I know this is definitely a thing, is that, people just come through Europe to get to UK because UK are the easy issue because we have a welfare state and blah, blah, blah. We have all the asylum seekers come here. It's like, actually, you don't really understand what happens in Europe then. And by the way, also, you've got to understand that that's what happens when you go around the world and have a massive empire. You'll have a lot of English-speaking asylum seekers come here because they speak the same language, or they speak a language that is prevalent in their country, because we went around the world sticking flags in different countries in the same way that France did that, and they'll get a lot more francophones from like Cameroon and French-speaking nations and Algeria and Niger and Mali and Tunisia and Morocco. They're going to be going to, much more likely to go to France than to the UK. So understand that language plays an important part. Our own history and our role in global history will play a part here. But actually, the reality is that no, not everyone goes through Europe to get to the UK. Far from the case. So the UK at 70,000 a year has way fewer asylum claims than big EU countries. Germany has 250,000. France has 100,000, Spain has 120,000, and then as a percentage of total population at 0.1%, the UK is far lower than smaller ones. The Netherlands has 0.3%, Denmark 0.3%, Belgium 0.3%, Finland 0.4%. So as a percentage of the population, actually, we're way down the list, and you can go and look at where we sit contextually here. Refugee claims around 70 to 80,000 annually. This is from 2023, or the most recent data. Population 67 million in the UK. Percentage, that's 0.12% of the population. Germany, far more claims. France, more claims. Italy, actually fewer claims, slightly smaller population and slightly less as a percentage. Spain, more claims. Sweden, fewer claims, but actually a larger percentage of population. Netherlands, likewise. So there is that. Again, it's just, let's make sure that we have an understanding. Right, then we're going to very quickly, I would love to play you this entire video. It's Diamond. This is Femi, who is really, really good on, and he's on the news quite a lot, and talk shows and whatnot. What happened, so just to give you a bit more context here before we go on to the flag waving, sometime back last year, Gary Lineker, former England football player, who was the main anchor for decades on Match of the Day, this great sporting iconic program in the UK. He has also been seen as a bit of a left winger, Gary Lineker, or at least he's actually housed refugees at his home. So he's a rich person, one of the highest paid in the BBC, but he's a big personality, commands this big salary, or commanded it, but then got into trouble for being anti-Israel in terms of what's going on in Gaza. And the BBC said you can't hold that position and have these political opinions, so you're out, thank you very much. And Gary Lineker, controversially for many, but actually thankfully for many who are kind of anti, Palestine, he was kind of moved aside, and he's no more at the BBC. So you've then just had another BBC, although I think this was on the ITV, but I think he works for both. Rylan, who was made famous through, Pop Idol or whatever, X Factor. Now he's one of these big presenters. He was on, I think, the ITV in front of a big screen, you'll see it in a second, of Nigel Farage, and then said things that were essentially broadly anti-migrant, pro-reform, and he said them on TV in a way that, hang on, like, you've just sacked Gary Lineker for saying that, but now they're just to his left here, there's a big screen with Nigel Farage on it, and he's expressing all of these kind of ideas about deportation and migration, and people nodding along with him. But actually they were exactly the sort of thing that Gary Lineker was saying over here, but now you haven't been sacked for saying this. And yet this is actually far more, I would say, kind of divisive, because it pertains to the UK, not to another country. And so it's interesting how the point is that I think we allow far more amplification of anti-migrant rhetoric and pro-reform UK rhetoric on national television than we do. In fact, they get platformed. So Farage just gets platformed the whole time. So Femi just did a whole video like looking at this and saying, look, you're a national TV host, so you are responsible for the narratives we get fed if you choose to repeat them on TV. And you watch people try to burn asylum seekers alive last year. So even if your crime is recklessness, not dishonesty, it's still unforgivable. So anyway, the analysis is so good from Femi, and I'd just love to play you that because it gives you a real sense of what's going on. Anyway, and then you've had, this is Douglas Carswell. So in the UK, he was a former Conservative Party member of Parliament. He then defected to UKIP when it was UKIP before it kind of became Reform. I mean, both of them still exist, but UKIP really became Reform UK. And when he was at UKIP, he then became the first and only UKIP parliamentarian, not because he was voted in as UKIP, but because he defected to UKIP as a Tory MP. He was Clacton, which is where Nigel Farage is now the MP, right? So he picked Clacton because he already knew that UKIP was strong in Clacton because Douglas Carswell was there. Anyway, Douglas Carswell is now using this. I know this saying has, from the river to the sea. It's been used by both Zionists and anti-Zionists, essentially, by, pro and anti-Palestine. This phrase is really divisive. from the river to the sea. And he's just said, from Epping to the sea, let's make England Abdul free. So the idea is, let's get rid of anyone who is, I don't know, Muslim or from a culture that might have that name. Any brown-skinned person, essentially. From Epping to the sea, let's make England Abdul free. That's a former member of parliament coming out and saying something like that in answer to Epping locals vow to stop paying council tax after the High Court ruled that asylum seekers can stay in a hotel. Okay, so that's where we're at the moment. It's a real divisive political landscape and social landscape, and you've got stuff like this happening where people are just pinning up flags anywhere, but you've got to look at who's doing this. So this is on the London Underground, and listen to the guy at the end.
There you go. I was very drunk, but I done it.
I was very drunk, but I'd done it. Right. So, you know, there is this kind of, although there are a lot of females and children involved in some of these protests now, a lot of people with flags, but there is also a kind of like white bloke with flags, drunk, putting them up here, there and everywhere. You've got, you know, stop the boats being daubed on different buildings. This is 230 miles from Dover in Kent, but you know, it's going to still get around. You've got, this is the sort of thing that you're seeing an awful lot of roundabouts like that. I've got it in my local roundabout that's just literally just down the road. In fact, all the ones around here, or many of them, and we've got flags on all sorts of lampposts and everything like that, which, you know, you might think, hey, that's not a problem. That's just showing national pride. But it's about, you know, who's doing this and what do they want to say by doing that. Interestingly, this particular one was done in Wales. And some Welsh people just repainted it with a Welsh flag and put F the English. So, you know, some of these have turned into memes because they've been really badly done. Like, this is England. You can't even spell England. There was another one by a zebra crossing that put this is England or England, and it was spelled Englang, Englang. And they could just, you know, you're thinking, really? And then that kind of feeds into this division of demographics where people are saying, oh, this is an uneducated working class thing. And then so you have divisions along like race and culture, and then divisions along demographic and social economic strata, status. And there is something interesting in that like there's definitely predominates in the working class in the UK, where that's most of the people we're seeing out on the streets appear to be the working class. But that's not to say that reform and this sentiment hasn't seeped right throughout. I live in a real middle class, like leafy suburb sort of place, and you know there are flags and whatnot here. So you know, and I'm not trying to be classist either. You know, it's just, remember there's that element to it too, but what's happening is this is then giving a platform and permission structure for people to just be overtly racist. So alongside these roundabouts and flags that you can say, okay, too much of an issue, you know, national pride, there are flags. Again, you know, you can see flags in many. I've been to France many times, and they're very proudly. And the Ukrainian flag is everywhere. The Ukrainian flag, but the nature of like the intent behind that means that you've got a very positive vision of nationalism, whereas this ends up not being a positive vision of nationalism now because of the intent behind it, and the intent is quite often something like this, where P word, short for Pakistanis, which in the UK is a racial slur, right? So, you know, this is what Raise the Colours is really about. So hashtag Raise the Colours is this movement to raise your flags. Alongside it sits this, and maybe underneath it sits this, and that's the issue. And you might be angry with me for saying that because you like to be proud about the flag and you want to have the permission to put the flag up everywhere. Fair enough, but let it be known that this is definitely simmering alongside and possibly underneath it. And now you've got Nigel Farage, Rupert Lowe, Robert Jenrick. So Nigel Farage in charge of Reform UK, Rupert Lowe, Reform UK, but had an argument with Nigel Farage, so now no longer Reform UK. but saying exactly the same stuff. Robert Jenrick, which is the Conservative Party, he ran against Kemi Badenoch to run the Conservative Party. He lost, but he wants to take the Conservative Party in the Reform UK direction. Elon Musk, Matt Goodwin, Tommy Robinson. Tommy Robinson is this guy that's been in prison, come out of prison. Now Elon Musk can't stop shouting about how wonderful Tommy Robinson is, but he is an EDL, English Defence League, which is kind of essentially your activist far right end of the political spectrum. You go out and have protests, and so that's Tommy Robinson, but he's not a nice person. Anyway, and all the misguided radicalized far right people you've emboldened, hope you're proud of yourselves. So this idea that okay, let's be proud of our flag and paint roundabouts, but this is where it's going. So it goes back to the idea that, do you know what do you want this to look like? Where do you want this to go? Because this is where it's going, and I'm going to show you where it's going in a minute with the protest. So although this is a very controversial view because it's got the C word in it, I'm sorry, but the reason why lots of people don't like the England flag isn't because it's England, but because the people flying it are usually hostile, racist C words. If you were normal about it, it probably wouldn't have the reputation it does. And this is a point. So it's like, this is the other side of the coin. So you got people saying, we want to be proud of our flag, we're going to put it up. Yeah, okay. If you want to be proud of your flag, then when you daubs, FPs, and go home and stop the boats and all this stuff, there's an element of racism there that's very overt. And so it's not the flag that we've got an issue with. It's the ideology that goes alongside it. And you're just starting to see everything being painted. Here you've got a trash tip outside somebody's house with 3 mattresses. Oh, it's white, it's rectangular, let's put the red the St George's cross on there. And it's what you're seeing. You've got Canary Wharf, where people have been going along in inflatable kayaks and putting up, this is on the River Thames, and putting up the George's Cross, and then that being caught on camera as someone falls in. But the sort of person you see for the balaclava clad person with the Union flag on his front, big muscly white guy with tattoos, that again, am I being classist here? And there are lots of discussions to be had about who is doing all of this, and really what their intent is, and why you would have to be balaclava clad if you're going to be proud. Or actually, it's not. Here's a former policeman who says, life is all about the choices you make, what's in your heart, knowing right from wrong, having the balls to face down your fears, doing the right thing for you and your family. I've made my choices. I refuse to be a puppet for crooked politicians. I've stood up, I've put my head above the parapet and spoken out, and I'll continue to fight to my last breath for the soul of our nation and the safety of our children. So if you look at his ID, he was in the police for 8 years. He's now a joiner by trade, and he's gone back into the building trade, right? So here he puts up a picture of him when he was a policeman, and then a picture of him putting up a flag on a lamppost, and you're like, interesting. What's all of this saying? What are you trying to say here? Like, when you're talking about made my choices, this is for my children, putting up a flag on a local lamppost is for my children. What is going on here? As someone interprets this, quite a long-winded way of saying you're a racist. I don't know that I would go that far, but can we make these correlations, and then is there causation, and so on and so forth. So much to be said, but all sorts of people are coming out and joining in here. Andrew Tate, who I think is a despicable human being, who's run away to Romania to do sex trafficking, then tried to escape to the US, and then came back to the UK, and everywhere he goes he's got court cases following him. of course, protect the woman. Yeah, right. He paints his car with a St. George's cross now, one of his many in his huge collection, in the money he's grifted off all sorts of vulnerable people. Nothing screams patriot quite like an alleged sex trafficker and rapist from Luton who affects an American accent and paints the St. George cross on his Italian supercar that was originally designed by an Argentinian. But yeah, you go for it. You be you. So this is what's slightly worrying, is that when you take it in a macro, looking at it from a macro point of view, as historian Peter Fritzsche wrote, in a 1930s Germany, quote, flags covered the country like a rash. Today, Britain is drowning in flags on bridges, plastered on roundabouts, even encouraged by Elon Musk. This isn't organic pride, it's manufactured nationalism designed to smother dissent and make loyalty a test. Flags are everywhere, democracy is nowhere, is the argument. As Darren Grimes, who is a Reform UK guy, says, incredible photo from Newcastle today of someone, adorned in all sorts of, I think, jingoistic, this is virtue signaling at the greatest there. But be proud of your flag. But what is a statement here? What are you most proud of? What do you want to happen? What do you want Britain to look like? And if it's like, well, this is shorthand for me saying I don't want brown people on my streets, then is this the right kind of nationalism to be proud of? And then this has then emboldened all sorts of really horrific activity, and a number of really quite racist examples have come forth. I'm going to give you two here. One is a Chinese restaurant that was daubed with all sorts of stuff here and ran aside, sort of go home and all that kind of stuff. So Dragon House, the owner said, I feel truly heartbroken today. My Chinese takeaway, which has been serving this community for more than 10 years, was vandalized with hateful graffiti telling us to go home. This is not just paint on the wall, it's blatant discrimination and it hurts deeply. The police are already following up on the incident. If anyone has seen anything or knows who did this, please contact us. We work hard every day to serve our customers with love and dedication. I believe our community is stronger than hate, and I hope everyone will stand together against this kind of behaviour. Luckily, I mean, the good news here is that a real patriot came and helped out, who is a local window cleaner who came and had his who uses a Chinese takeaway, came and helped clear it all up. So huge thank you to Isaac Crystal Clean Windows from York. This happened in York Limited. After this incident happened, he kindly came and cleaned our windows for free. When he heard about the hateful graffiti, he even helped us wash off the paint that was covering the word Chinese, so on and so forth. So, really good news there. But it was the permission that took place. This is one of the most famous ones that's happened in the last couple of days that has got people either cheering on or really offended.
Yeah, what? You can't even speak English. And that's for you.
You can't even stand English.
Do you know what you are? That is what we call slavery. Because people like you are the only people who are...
Stop!
Why did you throw that? And I'm going to get you, and I'm going to make you really know on the... Stop it, did you get that? Sit.
No,
I've got.
So basically, the context of this are two people came up to a Filipino nurse, and again, it's this idea of not understanding that we have required people through maybe a lack of decisions, decent decisions about training or whatever, but we've required people to come over to help us in positions where we don't have enough British people to do those roles, whether it be fruit picking or being a doctor or being a nurse. And here we have Filipino nurses helping us in the NHS to function. So rather than having a go at the system, or rather than having, questioning why we have this situation where we've got lots of Filipino nurses helping us out, attacking the Filipino nurse is like completely the wrong way to go about this. But attacking anyway the nurse and I presume family and whatnot, these two do this.
Why you attack him?
Okay.
Hey,
Yeah, you did.
Have you got off a rubber boat?
Oh, you did.
Did you come across
Yeah.
the channel?
I'm 15 years
Channel.
living in the UK. I'm British. Yeah.
Channel.
No.
Ban the immigrant.
So there he does. I think that's a Nazi sign and so on. Anyway, I'm not going to show you anymore. This is one of the most the more famous ones at the moment. NHS workers being racially assaulted in Halifax, which is further up north, York and Halifax, not too far from each other. This is what the people behind hashtag Raising the Colours have achieved. Farage TV stations, radio, newspapers have all been complicit in the demolishing of brown and black people in Britain. A summer of talking about nothing but asylum hotels. So that's sort of being really angry about the platforming of this rhetoric and narrative is really endangering people. So, and anyway, this was pretty horrible, and you've got all sorts going on here and a bit of assault going on there. Anyway, I believe they've now been arrested or something. Someone says, I have a community nurse come in every morning. I can't eat or drink anything till the nurse gives me my injection. Today, I've had no nurse yet, as the one allocated was attacked by racist yobs. They tell me they're sending another nurse, but can't say if they'll be here before 10 p.m. midnight. Thank you very much, Nigel Farage. So the idea is that, whatever you feel about immigration and whatever you feel about national pride and flags, this is either being co-opted or driven by the far right in the UK to a significant degree, and this is really sowing division. And again, the question is, where do you want this to go? What do you want this to look like? But interestingly, and as someone says, we've had a glimpse of the UK under Nigel Farage: violence against anyone not white. Our wonderful NHS workers violently assaulted. This was received by one of our followers and forwarded to us. Is this the British value they're protecting? So, but this is a problem throughout Europe and actually going on throughout the world. So you've got the rise of the far right, that being both fomented and as a result of fomented by people who want to see division in particularly Europe and Britain, but also driven by genuine issues with immigration, or at least genuine perceptions of issues with immigration. So as in what people like the Russians do in the Internet Research Agency in North Korea and Iran and China, they will take issues that exist and amplify them and so make those cracks turn into chasms, right? So immigration is something that needs to be dealt with by every major party in Britain. Everyone knows that now. Going into the next elections in the UK in 2028, if you don't have a narrative for immigration, you are going to be absolutely destroyed in the election. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a while. But it appears that we have protests now going on, or marches going on in Sydney, Melbourne, Perth and Brisbane. This is Australia, as this handle on Twitter is very pro this. British Patriot saying, breaking, protests across Australia have erupted. 500,000 patriots on the streets across the country demanding remigration. Australia has woken up. You're going to see this term remigration, which is deporting people. The march is not about skin colour, it's about values and behaviours, says one here, as all these people. Interesting Aboriginal flag there. I wonder whether that has been co-opted because so before we go there, Tommy Robertson, let's go back to him. He's talked about these ones in Australia. The natives across the West have had enough of the forced population replacement as anti-immigration protests hit Australia. I mean, gee whiz. So he's calling the white people in Australia natives and saying they're fed up of migration, when the natives, the true natives, the Aborigines in Australia are going to be like, do you know, we're sick of like the genocide of white people that came over, and we've got something to say about that. Like the lack of the lack of awareness here from Tommy Robertson is absolutely insane. But then you've had stuff like this erupting in some of these.
That's Thomas Sowell there of NSN.
So then you've had these fights going on between factions in these marches in Australia, in this particular place. And it turns out that actually this was the security of a guy called Avi Yemeni, who I think is a far-right Israeli provocateur, pro-Israeli or Israeli provocateur. sitting on the far right, the Israelis, annoying other far right people who are anti-Semite and anti-Israeli, then starting a ruckus, people below saying, no, this is like Antifa type thing. It's like, no, literally, we know the people, like you can see them. That's a member of the NSN. That's, these are the far right attacking the far right, different factions of far. Anyway, that was going on in Australia. I'm not hugely knowledgeable on what's going on in Australia, but this point from an Australian is, I guess, pretty incisive.
You invaded this country, you stole the land, you encouraged genocide. You are the one that had privilege from it. You are the great-great-grandfathers Aboriginal, bro. It doesn't matter. There was a lot of them that were. So
talking about, I'm Aboriginal, I'm saying this, and then someone saying, well, actually, my great-grandfather's Aboriginal, I'm still saying this, and the confrontations going on. So heightened, racial and social anxieties going on here. Then apparently, according to, again, the British Patriot, this is erupting in Japan. And Japan is an interesting one at the moment because there is a rise of the right in the right-wing populist movement is gathering huge momentum in Japan, and I think Ishiba's in a lot of trouble. Watch that space. Japan's always been kind of anti-foreigner, like going back to 400 years of gaijin and not really accepting people from outside inside Japan. So actually, it is somewhere where you wouldn't think it, but there is quite a lot of, like, I guess, inherent racism, but because you see it coming from Japanese people, you might not see it as racism if you're a white person. Just the change of context can confuse people, but it does exist there. So it's really interesting. There's a rise of the right-wing populist movement there. But then now let's go back to the UK. So this is supposedly building in the UK. So again, we people drinking beer. Are there certain demographics represented here, overrepresented here? How much is this a problem? How much is this just a certain section of society that have always existed there, but have now been emboldened? Is this something that has increased over the last 1 year, 5 years, 10 years? Is this the same as these are the same people you would have seen against West Indians coming in the Windrush generation of the 1950s, against Pakistanis and Indians coming over in the 50s, 60s. And 70s, or is this a new thing? Is this a new issue because immigration has changed categorically in some kind of way? Interesting, you got a black guy there waving a flag, and so what is going on here? What are their grievances? Is this about genuine pride?
It's still coming.
Or is this about migration? And other things. So this is West Drayton supposedly today or yesterday. Stoke. This is Stoke, and again, what do the people? What issues do these people have? And of course, someone wearing an English-born and proud of it. There are probably some conclusions you could derive from the people who are upset here. Here we have, I think this is up. Yeah, Canary Wharf. Locals conquer Canary Wharf, says the British Patriot here. And again, Rule Britannia and all that. Interesting to see. Was that a Confederate? No, it wasn't. It was a Union flag. I just thought that would be interesting. So as you can see, this is going through a shopping centre. It says we are not the far right, but we're not far wrong. And again, make your conclusions as to what's going on there. But this is definitely, ripe for the far right to either take advantage of it, or that's what you're seeing there. Why would you be wearing balaclavas if you weren't proud of what you're doing in a way that was completely lawful, and you weren't ashamed, or you didn't want to be found out? Do you know what I mean? Like, there's a reason you're wearing balaclavas there. This is it happening in Falkirk up in Scotland. And you're thinking, well, what kind of music is that? That looks, is that sort of punk going on to far right music? And I think it was either this one or a similar one where, one of the people circled in it was like an actual neo-Nazi organizer. So, this is what's going on there. Again, not asylum seekers parading the streets in balaclavas, attacking the police and intimidating local residents is right-wing thugs, says Harry Eccles. The idea that, you're worried about asylum seekers being criminals and threatening people, and that's literally what you're doing here. As someone says, they don't really think about these flares. Why do you put the flare people at the front and everyone else behind just can't breathe? But anyway, that's by the by.
Into the car park! Get behind them fucking benches! Car park it is! Put that flare out, I'm dying here.
Yeah, put that flare out, I'm dying here. But, again, almost all of them are men. We have seen in the other one lots of women and children as well, and young people. So now this you'll find fascinating. This pretty much says it all for me.
These lads are sticking up for this country. If there were a war in this country, we'd be the first one there. So all I'm saying is, Mr. Donald Trump, please intervene.
What would you want Trump to do?
I want him to buy England like he wanted to buy Canada and make us a state that we're proud of.
You want to be part of the United States?
Yes.
He wants to be a state that he can be proud of, but not Britain, not have, I guess, the Union flag anymore. You'd have the United States Stars and Stripes, so you can throw away your Union flag and make us a state we can be proud of. There's a lot to be proud of in the UK. What is it that would make you proud of being in the UK? Is it just not having brown-skinned people in it? I mean, honestly, like, and I'm not trying to be like, oh, you're just a racist, but I'm actually like, what would you be proud of? What does British pride look like to you? I'm gonna chat with my mate, who is quite nationalist, but not in this way. And I've talked on many videos with him previously on my philosophy channel. We are tippling philosophers together, and we go out and talk about this stuff. He lives locally, one of my best mates, but he has a very different view on things. But even he was like, this is not the kind of nationalism that I can really get behind. And he comes to it from a religious point of view. And he says, when you look at what Jesus said in the Bible, is this the kind of, like, a lot of you are wearing crosses and talking about Christianity versus Islam and using religion as a vehicle to deliver this kind of sense of nationalism. But he's like, you won't find any defense of that in the Bible, which I thought was interesting. So we're going to have a chat about that going forward. But what would make you proud of Britain? What is it? What is it that you would like to see? How would you like Britain to look? And I'm fairly sure it'd just be like, mainly white people. And the thing is that we're in a position we're in now where we have a very mixed society in very many places. Now, if you don't want brown and black skinned people to be in some of these places, when these are now second, third, fourth generation people, like, what do you want to do about that? Like, do you want to take British citizens who just look differently to you and just throw them into another country? Well, they could just say, well, they want to throw you into another country because they've just got as much right to those kind of opinions as you, as in they are British citizens and so are you. So, like, what do you want to do? How do you get back to an 1850s Britain? Yeah. Anyway, how much of this is being driven by people from abroad? And I could say they're loving this. They're lapping it up, and they will be fomenting this. They will be spreading this. The blue tick accounts on Twitter. Meanwhile, in Moscow, paint red crosses on roundabouts, put flags on lampposts, send in Ryland. Ryland's a guy we talked about previously. Burn hotels, say the Russians working in these places. And the Reform Party is just well behind this. Hashtag Farage riots, says Reform Party UK Exposed. It's well worth following Reform Party UK Exposed. You can feel the tension rising in the UK tonight. This was from the other night. You can feel the tension rising in the UK. The tension in Britain is palpable. You can really feel it. Oh, all sounds very similar. I wonder whether this is written by someone in Moscow or Pyongyang or Tehran. So just beware that there will be a lot of amplification, a lot of platforming going on. And it's interesting to know how representative these people are on the streets. So these are real people on the streets, definitely real people on the streets. But how representative that are they of the whole of the UK? And then how representative of the UK are these opinions as well? And we don't know that these are real people. So as someone says here, well done Farage and Co. You have infected morons with your nationalist nonsense and managed to weaponize the Union flag and the English flag. This is not big-hearted and proud patriotism. It is small-minded bigotry and nationalism. Now, it's not to say there isn't a need to get more sort of positively nationalistic in a healthy way. It's not to say we can't be proud of the UK, of England, and Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland. But you know, is this really what we should be shouting for and clamoring for? Now, I just want to say that Elon Musk has gone to town on this, as he did with the grooming gangs previously. He wants to get involved in British politics. England is finally waking up, says end wokeness with. Whose streets? Our streets, rather than streets of, I guess, asylum seekers, brown-skinned people. I don't know. Now, these are significant numbers of people, right? But Elon Musk is jumping on this. He's loving it. He's talking about the rape of Britain now by retweeting who else but Tommy Robinson, who says the same thing. Elon Musk, Union flag, as Tommy Robinson has a picture of a girl with a Union flag. We will fight for their futures. What does that mean? What does that mean, fight for their futures? What does their future mean? What future do you want for them? Where they just live in a country with white people? I don't understand. What is their future? And Elon Musk is well behind that, reiterating it. The nightmare happening to Epping and hundreds of other towns in Britain, says Elon Musk, and Ireland will come to your town too unless it is stopped by the people. So he is really shouting for this right-wing populist ground-up movement of the people to strip us of all of the establishment political parties, so Reform UK can get in, and then he can take advantage. I wonder who's working with Reform UK at the moment. Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel, one of the South African oligarchs that's associated with Elon Musk. Interesting. Join the freaking dots here. Join the dots. This is their. Honestly, these South African tech oligarchs, their way into British power is through Reform UK. Do be under no illusions. So every village in Britain, says Elon Musk, will become Epping unless the people of Britain take action now. And then, retweeting other people saying similar things. Now, Sharon Davis here, who is a really famous person in the UK. She's a former British Olympic swimmer, Olympic medalist, 13 times Olympics 3 racing speaker awards, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, Sharon Davis said, you cannot have a British government saying illegal foreign immigrants are the first legal priority over tax-paying British people. This is an insane position to hold and expect the support of your people. As a government, you are officially working against the electorate. So you've now got famous people coming out and reiterating this kind of rhetoric where they appear to be kind of misinterpreting what's going on. As someone says back, Sharon, you are peddling lies and misinformation. The government did not and will not make that argument. I don't think you have read the transcript of the court hearing. I'm not accusing you of being thick or stupid. This government inherited this problem from the erstwhile Tory government. Labour promised in their manifesto to close down all asylum seekers' hotels by 2029. What was argued in court is that the government has obligations, mainly Article 3 of the European Court of Human Rights and the UK Human Rights Act, to provide accommodation to all asylum seekers until their cases are resolved. That Epping District Council can't use a little used bylaw, and accusing the Bell Hotel of changing the hotel planning permission to housing asylum seekers, triggering the closure of the hotel. The government argued that it does not have enough time to find alternative accommodation for those affected. Besides, the Bell Hotel contended that they have been housing the asylum seekers for years, even before the current government, without let, but that the council were triggered by protesters. So at no time was the rights of the asylum seekers preferred over the rights and freedoms of Brits. So there's this idea that, you know, you're putting British people last and asylum seekers first. It's like, no, you want to do both. You want to be sorting out both. And this is where it comes to, like, you know, you got to understand the complexity of all these situations, and also understand that you are pitting really, I think, the working class against each other here, and it's just dangerous. But then Elon Musk says the government is committing treason against the people in retweeting Sharon Davis. And then Geopolitics saying Tommy Robinson has said over 1 million people will attend his free speech rally in September the 13th. And Elon Musk says at least that many. And then you've got him saying, in answer to the this person saying all of the political parties in Cologne, Germany, have agreed to only speak about the positive aspects of third world migrants. Only the AfD party refused, and they support deportation. So again, Alternative for Deutschland, the AfD anti-migrant party that Musk has previously championed. Cologne vote AfD only party to speak. Free to speak on migration, and Elon Musk says either Germany votes AfD or it is the end of Germany. So he's again still banging on about voting for AfD, voting for Reform UK, and then here somebody says, look, Elon Musk is dangerous. Somebody saying you see them as mass illegal immigrants who stain and drain the system. The Labour Party sees them as mass potential voters to game and tame the system. The idea that we want to import people who are going to vote Labour. They're not going to vote Labour. They don't have the right to vote. It's just this great replacement theory that Elon Musk is now platforming, quite literally. He said they are importing voters. And then someone else says, I think we're reaching the stage where the police need to think about picking a side. Elon Musk says yes. So now you've got Elon Musk, one of the most powerful men in the world, saying the police need to pick the side. They need to come out against the government. He's trying to incite a civil war, division, which he's done previously. And he's going down the route of far right populism. Okay, so the final part to this is so we have an issue with immigration. I've not really talked about any way of solving that. I'm saying it does need to be solved. There needs to be robust things done about migration that should be within the law, follow due process, and be compassionate and humane. And then, I think there is stuff you can do, but it's going to take money and time, right? But people don't like money and time. They think, oh, no, let's just pick people up, put them in boats and send them to another country. Let's do the ICE thing. So, and as you heard earlier, I want Donald Trump to come and buy our nation. Ugh. So, okay, well, what's going on then? So really what's going on here is this is going to be weaponized by Reform UK as a way to get voted in the next election. And they will win and it will work, right? It's just that simple. Complex problems demand complex solutions, but they only ever really get you only really vote in simple solutions to complex problems, and they are usually far too inadequate. But Reform UK are going to be championing this. This is their doing, and they are loving this. They love social division, they love otherizing, they love scapegoating, And that's what will happen here. But the problem is they are getting platformed by all the major mainstream media networks and newspapers. And to a degree that it is not representative of what's going on. And what is going on is that you have a situation where the narrative is being driven. And then the narrative is then picked up because it's being driven. So you're saying, you say, Reform are getting this much coverage because they're this popular. But you say they are this popular because you've given them this coverage, right? And these ideas are this popular because you've amplified and megaphoned their grievances. And it's this chicken and the egg situation, but it's this spiraled situation whereby they are popular because you've platformed them and you haven't platformed the alternative. So there are 4 Reform MPs, or is it 5 at the moment? I don't know. 4, because Lee Anderson. So going back to the we're here to protect women, of course, Reform UK, one of their parliamentarians, I think, is he been stripped or at the moment suspended because of domestic abuse, and then Nigel Farage saying that's not a problem and whatever, But hang on, you're saying that you're about protecting women over there, and yet your MP is seemingly able to go through domestic abuse. And anyway, so they're down 2 MPs because of the argument with Rupert Lowe. So he's now kind of independent, and they're down to 4 MPs. Lib Dems have 72 MPs, and you don't see them platformed in the way you see Reform consistently platformed, and that is like deeply concerning. So as someone says, why is Richard Tice, who's one of the main guys in, he was a guy that was in charge of Reform UK until Nigel Farage came back. Why is Richard Tice on Sky News again when there are only 4 Reform MPs and 72 Lib Dems? And now I've talked to you about like stats previously, about getting a correct understanding of the stats. Labour definitely, if they want to at all have a chance of getting voted back in, one, they do need to be robust on immigration in the way I've already talked about, but also shout about where they've succeeded. It's about controlling the narrative, and you have to advertise how well you have done with anything in government these days. Take a leaf out of Donald Trump's book. Shout about how awesome you are all the time. How you've brought down net migration, how overseas workers and small boats arrivals and so on. Now there will be peaks and troughs here, but as long as the general trend is in a direction that you want it to be in, it depends. Or you can go and create a really positive case for immigration. I don't think you're ever going to win over people like we've seen already, but maybe you just say, well, we're not intending to win over those people. We want to win over these more consistent voters over here, or whatever. Whatever you need to do, whatever your position is on migration, just have it well sewn up, whether it's pro-migration or anti-migration. You need to be really clear on what your narrative is by 2028, big time. So fascinating that regular BBC host Ryden can express views that right-wingers agree with, and a story not be that he should be sacked by BBC. He's on radio 2 this afternoon, and yet Gary Lineker says whatever he said about Israel and Palestine, and he gets sacked. Now it's interesting when you talk about Reform UK, they are deeply popular and getting more popular at the moment, but they are also full of a lot of these people that you see in the videos of those protests. Those sorts of people are the people who have, many of whom have been voted into councillor positions in the local elections. I can go through a whole litany of egregious behaviours from these people, and sackings and resignations because they're not fit for purpose. This is not, it is a nascent party in many respects, and they are not serious about anything other than immigration. So you put them in charge of a council, and they don't really know what they're doing in terms of governing a council and making it work. I could bore you at length because I follow this quite closely. But anyway, just as an example, a Reform councillor has resigned after calling his neighbour, a black British family, the N-word, threatening to unleash the EDL on them, so the English Defence League. So that's the sort of person he is, saying there'd be black body bags. This isn't one man's disgrace. It's a glimpse into the ugly soul of Reform UK. So, and then you can see a whole thread here detailing that. But actually, this is a problem that Reform UK are going to have to deal with before the next election. Although I do think they are going to waltz in unless the other parties do something very, very significant, because it's looking absolutely crazy at the moment. So a nowcast update from Election Maps UK. Reform have 344 out of the 650 MPs. Labour down 306 to 105. Reform have 30%, 30.8% of the vote, 21.3% for Labour. Lib Dems up 8 to 80, SNP up 36 to 45, decimating Labour up in Scotland. Conservatives down 92 to 29. There are theories that the Conservative Party will essentially cease to exist in the next party as they've been replaced by Reform. The old school Conservatives, not sure what they should do, are probably going to try and join Lib Dems. Or they, what does the Conservative Party do? Do they try and be a sensible centre-right party, or do they just try and go for right-wing populism to fight back against Reform? Or do they merge with Reform? That is a genuine dilemma for them at the moment. Green Party up a little bit and others up a little bit, but you can see that Reform UK suddenly look like they have taken over the entirety of the UK. Be warned about land doesn't vote, rather like you see in the US. So a lot of these are big counties, and London being a tiny bit red there, actually that's worth a whole bunch of seats. As you then start seeing from there, that's the hexagon map is much better. So here we have voting intentions of 16 to 17 year olds. So although Reform only have 23%, these are supposed to be really idealistic young people who like all kind of woke and social justice warriors supposedly, but except they're not. There's a whole cross-section of people. They're just young people, and they often just take on the views of their parents, as you saw from the people on the streets just then. 23% for Reform is huge, and there's a massive problem. I find it interesting, 24% for Labour, and then you get the YRP. So the Your Party is Jeremy Corbyn, the old Labour leader, firebrand left-winger, pacifist. He has started this party that's going to divide Labour into two and will allow Reform to come in. So much of why I think Reform will get into next election is because Labour will be split another way. They're already split. The left is already split. Labour, Lib Dem, Green, SNP, Plaid Cymru, depending on where you are in the country. So it's already split that way. Tories were never split, so the Conservatives never had a problem. They always had the advantage because the other side was split. And so in the first past the post non-representative system, Tories had the advantage all the time. This last election was the first time the Tories had been properly split. Reform came along, completely split the vote, Labour gets in. But there was some fairness there because, it's about time the right wing got split. But if Reform effectively just destroyed Conservatives so that the Conservatives they aren't really a thing, then they won't get split again, and Reform, and then Your Party come along and you've got another party now splitting the left. And that is a massive problem. Jeremy Corbyn will be the reason that Reform UK get voted in 2028. That if Nigel Farage ever becomes our Prime Minister, God forbid that happening. Not that I believe in God, but it will be on Jeremy Corbyn's head, in my opinion. So Labour 24%, Reform 23%, Your Party 21%, Conservatives 13%, Lib Dem 12%. Interesting, Greens only 6%. I thought they would be higher for the young people. And this is another one, even worse prediction, but this is coming from Zia Youssef, who was the leader or like the treasurer or whatever, deputy of Reform. Then he left because he didn't like what they were saying about people in burqas, and then he came back and blah, blah, blah. So latest polls were delivering a thumping Reform majority with the Lib Dems the official opposition. The Uniparty, so that's something you hear from conspiracy theorists in the US, here even more so, the Labour getting decimated, Tories getting decimated, just almost ceasing to exist, and then Reform absolutely smashing it. And then you're now hearing that Jacob Rees-Mogg, who's this Conservative politician who I despise, kind of rich, privileged Lord Farquhar of the kind of Conservatives. And I don't like Nigel Farage either. So Jacob Rees-Mogg is looking like he's going to defect to the to the Reform Party, and he'll probably then get back in the next election under Reform. You'll get a lot of that. So just be warned, Reform are just basically importing Trumpian policies. You've had the Nottingham Council that are now run by Reform. They've now banned media from interviewing them because they don't like difficult questions. So they have taken a leaf out of Trump's book. So much for free speech, says Dale Vince. Reform UK blacklisting the Nottingham Post for doing its job is classic authoritarian move. If you can't answer questions from your local paper, how the hell are you going to run the country? Spoiler, you're not. This is what Trump does, bans media, and he thinks are not nice to him. If Farage is really so thin-skinned and narcissistic, is he our Trump light? So the idea that the Reform are supposed to be the free speech people, Tommy Robinson's all about free speech, and then Reform, they refuse to even speak to local press because the questions are just a bit too difficult for them. It's pathetic, absolutely pathetic. And I'm going to leave you with this. So I'm not a fan of Reform, but predominantly because I think they will just set fire to all our institutions and destroy the UK in exactly the same way MAGA is destroying the United States of America at the moment. MAGA republicanism is torching the traditions, and if you're a true conservative, you should not like what MAGA is doing, and you should not like what Reform is going to do. You should not like it. But I think they will basically be Trump 2.0, and I'm insanely worried. Like foreign diplomacy policy is going to go out the window. Domestic policy, you can say goodbye to the NHS, you can say goodbye to an awful lot of the welfare state, and you can welcome in division and attacks on brown and black people and the sort of thing that you're seeing over there that we've seen previously. Now, I just want to, I'm obviously going to be a bit partisan. I'm trying to be objective here, but it's difficult because I have my very strong views. But actually, again, this isn't about, I've tried to steer away from actually this being about immigration, but it's about perceptions of immigration, and it's about where you want the country to go and what you want it to look like and why you're so angry. And who is it that is angry? But if you're sweeping along much of the electorate with you, then actually it's not just your working class people up in arms, the sort of people that would have been in the BNP and the sort of people who are in the EDL. Those people are up in arms. I think that's what you're seeing a lot of on the streets right now. The question is, how representative are they? And does that then creep into much of the other areas of Britain's demography? To the point where, you might not be on the streets and you might not be shouting and effing and jeffing about immigrants, but you're going to be believing the same thing sitting comfortably at home. And you're going to vote Reform. But one thing I do want to talk about here is this that came out the other day. So a right-wing think tank has set out the AI models to analyse different think tanks from different political areas of the spectrum to see who are more objectively factual and moral and whatever. And all the AI models have basically rated right-wing think tanks lower in terms of morality, objectivity and quality than those on the left. And this is absolutely fascinating. So instead of going, oh my goodness, we need to change how we do our think tanks, it's like, well, the models must be wrong, right? And I know there are accusations of bias within AI modeling, and there is something to be said about that. They are Western-leaning, pro-American, not pro-American, but biased towards American thinking because they're generally looking at the internet, which is broadly speaking American, and all of the stuff they're looking at will be in that context. So there are biases that exist. But it's the idea that, as Matthew Lewis here says, right-wing think tank says, we had an AI review the objectivity and morality of a bunch of think tanks, and it found left-leaning think tanks were more objective and moral. The conclusion, the models are wrong, the Conservatives should force AI companies to change them. This is exactly what Elon Musk did with Grok. Grok started coming up with stuff that he didn't like ideologically, even though it's just surveying all of the knowledge from the internet, and saying, I don't like that. So he retrained Grok to be more right wing. This is what they're saying. It's like, oh, we don't like this. So we just need to retrain AI models to be more fascist and to like right wing think tanks. But it's interesting that they found the data's out there that right-wing think tanks are, Heritage Foundation, AEI, and I would argue, so I was blue in the face at that, I'm sure that's an absolutely correct analysis, because some of those think tanks are egregious, absolutely egregious, and play fast and loose with facts and morality completely. But anyway, that's just another thing to add to my list of grievances with what's going on here. So I don't know what I'm trying to say. I'm deeply, deeply worried that when you've got Elon Musk and Peter Thiel getting together with Reform and backing Reform, you have MAGA now taking place in the UK. So as much, if you are out there and you're worried about what MAGA has done to the US, you should be worried about what Reform UK will do to the UK, because I think it will be identical, and I think the AFD will do it to Germany. And do you know what? Bring back establishment boring politicians and politics with like experts who kind of have a degree of knowledge, not a physical degree, an amount of knowledge in their requisite areas, to kind of rule sensibly, like swinging from crazy to crazy. I don't know. It's just, I'm deeply worried. But then, then there is this prickly topic of immigration that does need to be solved. And the problem is, it's going to get worse, because we've got climate change and we've got more wars popping up at the moment than we've had for some time. And you are going to get huge movements of people. Climate change, when you have the US going, I don't need to solve climate change, and Reform coming in saying we need to get rid of net zero, it's a waste of time. I heard someone today on the radio, like a politician, he's either Conservative or Reform, I think he's Conservative, saying, look, China and the US aren't doing net zero, so we shouldn't bother. And it's like, so like, this isn't because you disagree with climate change. This is because you're like, we should just give up trying to be good because these guys aren't being good. It's like, yeah, but we're worth less than 0.1% of emissions. It's like, so everyone just gives up because the US, rather than trying to convince the US to change their ways, just everyone should just give up. And like, so you admit that climate change is an issue and we should strive for this, but we shouldn't because it's costing us, even though actually you look at China and what they're doing with renewables, is they're stomping all over the rest of the world with regard to renewables. So, get your facts straight and kind of understand what's going on here. But it's this idea that I think you are going to get more migrants moving around the world because you have climate changing at a challenging rate, and you've got wars taking place in really problematic areas, and you have people like Russia fomenting discord or even it's not fomenting discord, it's just showing how attractive migration is in the Sahel region of Africa and facilitating migration routes through Libya and up into the Mediterranean. We need to understand that these are problems that do exist, but we can do things about them. But we should not let Russia and other ne'er-do-wells control the narrative and foment discord that translates into people, walking through the streets and I think sowing division and discord. It is a problem, and it's going to get more of a problem. Is this a problem that can only be solved by going through a whole bunch of riots? Is that what we're going to experience over the next couple of years, or will in the UK Labour be able to get a handle on this? I don't know. They're fighting a Reform Party that has the backing of some of the most powerful people on earth, literally the most powerful people on earth, and then you can throw in the Russian Federation on top of that, and probably Iran and North Korea fomenting this. So it's going to be one hell of a challenge. That's my analysis. Take care. I'll speak to you soon.